joining us.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, let's just start with the basics. What is sustainable development?
Sustainable development is an international attempt to integrate economic policy, social policy with environmental policy.
Okay, so what does it look like for the average person? What is this sustainable development, living like that?
It's about building these green communities where these high density homes and apartment buildings and that sort of thing integrated with commercial activity, so that you don't have to drive anywhere. You can just walk places. There's bike paths everywhere. You see it starting to grow in the streets of Washington, D.C. I was just talking there just a couple days ago for CPAC, and I was talking with my sister about it while we were driving around. You see these streets where all of the lanes now are, the streets in D.C. were bad enough to begin with.
I just moved from D.C. a few months ago.
As did I escaped. But the lanes change all of a sudden because they've created all these bike paths. And really, when you think about it, and I don't want to get too conspiratorial here, but when you think about it, the creation of these bike paths isn't simply to promote bicycle use, but it really does drive traffic crazy. And the more you can do to convince people that it's a bad idea to drive, the less likely they are to drive.
Okay, well, you know, I like walkable cities. I like walkable communities. A lot of people living in South Florida like those aspects of it, but it's the international aspect that I think a lot of our viewers might be sort of confused by. I want to throw up a quote that we have here about individual rights versus the collective, and you have this as an opening, actually, quote from the Blaze magazine piece on sustainable development. Quote, in the process of implementing sustainable development, individual rights will have to take a back seat to the collective. Now, this was uttered by a Mr. Harvey Reuven, who, this might surprise you, is the Miami-Dade County Clerk of Courts, speaking to Agenda 21 in Johannesburg, South Africa. Why was he saying this? What does this mean?
Well, this was the 10th anniversary, meeting of the UN about Agenda 21. And he was speaking to this group, and nobody realizes this is a pretty senior government official. And this is somebody who has a lot of power over local government and local communities. The man was there to speak about how wonderful this Agenda 21 idea was and the fact that they are making progress on this. But he says, what we have to do is convince people that their rights take a back seat. And so what's fascinating about him is that he is the co-founder of an organization we call ICLEI, International Council for the
Local
Environmental
it's actually quite paradoxical,
Initiatives. Right? It's almost impossible to say. So ICLEI, he is the co-founder of ICLEI, which is the organization that has put together more than 600 cities, towns, and counties across America, in just America alone. More than 600 cities, towns, and counties have signed on to ICLEI's agenda to implement pieces of Agenda 21 in various stages around the country.
Who determines sustainability? This is always the question that I've had about this. Like, and how do they determine what's supposed to be sustainable? Because, you know, people have been saying, I mean, I actually have a quote from Malthus, who was an early 19th century philosopher, and, you know, he said, the superior power of population cannot be checked without producing misery or vice. So this idea that we're just going to run out of stuff,
roundly debunked, by the way.
Right? No, of course, but the point is that this is not a new not a new theory. And by the way, some people actually say that he's not debunked. It's just we haven't waited long enough.
Oh, okay.
So I'm pointing this out. Right. Once we get to 10 billion, Amy, that's when everyone dies. But so I just want to know how do they even try to define this? You know, within the Agenda 21 context, like how are they saying it has to do with energy needs? It's everything in.
It's about there are two main factors, and they go hand in hand, and that is reduced energy consumption and social justice. Mm-hmm. Those two things work hand in hand.
What is the social justice part?
There's the concentration of wealth and land ownership. That's why they're so anti-private property.
Private property, yeah.
Because the accumulation and concentration of wealth is found in private property. In 1976, the UN said in a meeting in Vancouver, British Columbia, talked about how bad private property was because of the accumulation of wealth and the concentration of wealth that private property creates. And so they fought against private property for those very reasons. And then the sustainable development thing, this is an interesting factoid, well, interesting to me. In 1987, a woman named Dr. Bernland created a report for the UN called Our Common Future, and that's where they invented the term sustainable development. the author of that report was the vice president of Socialist International. That should tell you something about the creation of the term sustainable development. That report, that UN report in 1987, was what planted the seeds and was the jumping off point for the UN's creation of Agenda 21 in 1992.
Why should I be scared? I mean, I'm listening to this.
You should be.
I don't own a car. I love to bike. I love to get outside. I love to walk. I love the fact 24 hours a day I can buy a bottle of wine across the street from my apartment. I think this all sounds great. To be
At
honest
9
with
in
you.
the morning, you should get a bottle of
This
wine.
just sounds great. So why is it scary to me?
Right.
Yeah, well,
Go ahead.
The bad thing is
It's the removal of choice. When you look at the obsession with high-speed rail from, let's say, Tampa to Orlando, something you could drive in 45 minutes. When you buy a car and you pay that car off, even if you sell it at a loss, you've acquired property. When you are taxed for the purpose of a high-speed rail, you lose property. When you buy a ticket, you get transportation but no property. When you buy a car, you get transportation and property. No matter how wealthy you are in the city, there's only so much square footage you can allot for yourself, even if you're the richest guy in the city. Everywhere else, you could acquire more property and build a bigger home.
But that's my choice to live in a city.
Right, but what,
I can live in any
but
city I
this is
want
by
around the
force what
world.
he's talking about. It's talking about transferring the individual rights to acquire property for his or her own use and transfer it into the communal use.
This is an anti-capitalist, anti-consumerist movement. This is a movement that wants equality of outcomes, not equality of opportunity. This is pure, fundamental social.
I want to know what the worst things are that have already come into play because of Agenda 21. Because we talked about this. Because I had a similar question to Matt, which is like, I mean, the bike lane people,
Right.
kind of
It's-
annoying,
it's
but not the end of the world
Right.
for me at least.
Exactly.
So
And
what are the worst
there's
things that have
nothing-
already
there's
kind of
nothing-
happened?
There's nothing wrong with riding a bicycle, and there's nothing wrong with walking to work, and there's nothing wrong with driving to
It
work.
depends. If you veer into someone's lane as they're driving. Anyway, go ahead.
Those messengers.
Yeah,
I
the
don't
free
know.
game and that. But the worst parts are, it's the individual liberty part that Andrew talked about. It's all about creeping into your life and controlling what it is that you get to do, that you get to choose as an American. Here's some things that fall under the Agenda 21 standards and guidelines. And it's not just about property. Okay, so you want to live in a small apartment in New York. I want to live on a ranch in Idaho. I mean, I should have the opportunity to choose that. But
What are you doing here?
But if property exists,
I'm visiting.
He's not a resident.
I'm actually in Idaho.
if property no longer exists for the individual, but in a collectivist sense,
Right.
then
It's
capitalism
goes-
is
Okay, but
dead.
It goes beyond property
Yeah.
and acreage that you take up.
But let me take up Matt's question, which is, should we really fear this? I mean, does the slumlord in Rio de Janeiro care about Agenda 21?
No, because it's about, okay, when you're talking about bringing the one world government, which is their stated goal, then yes, it should have you something to fear. Because the slumlord isn't worried about being brought down. He can only be brought up. The entire idea of this one world government is to bring the U.S. down. It's not to bring everybody else up.
It drags,
it's to bring everybody else
people
down.
from out of the city back into the city. After World War II, everybody ran from the city into the Levitt homes and the subdivisions.
right.
And what that does is it drags them back into it and forces them to collectively.
But hold on, Andrew.
It's
A
pure
lot of
government
urban
control.
but hold on. A lot of urban planners would tell you the reason why you have this proliferation of suburbs and the cul-de-sacs and the long driveways.
It's because how
and
miserable the city is.
No, it was because of tax incentives, because of zoning initiatives.
No, people
I mean,
want the
all of these
backyards.
things.
They want the
No,
swimming
they don't.
pools
Lots of
and
people live in
driveways and
cities. A lot of
two-car
people
garages.
choose city.
And they were able to do it. They were able to choose that and
But
move
this
out
is
of
the
city.
opposite of that. This is saying we've got to roll that backwards now.
That same
We've
article
gotta
I
roll
wrote, it talked about actually the people in rural areas that supply us with food that the government's going to give them more money to keep supplying us food. So why would I want to leave there and go into the
government's
city?
going to run the farms.
Right, the government will control. That's the whole.
They need an enforcement mechanism.
Right.
That's
but
what they're missing.
Here's what's even more insidious. Let's say that we all agree that, you know what, it'd be great for everybody to live in cities. We all live in apartment buildings and we all live communally. We all have a 400 square foot apartment.
Economic diversity.
Okay, and everybody.
Those cities
right.
are, by their definition, communal.
Okay, and
Right.
so let's say that that's all good. I don't have anything against cities other than I don't want to live in them. But the really insidious part comes from these things like, and when I get back to what's on the Agenda 21 agenda, smart meters to tell you how much energy you can use in your home. Various audits that different communities and counties and states are doing of energy companies to see who's using how much energy and should they be using that much energy. There's also an angle of it that is about population control and population reduction. It's not just about Chris owns 20 acres and Andrew owns 1 acre. Is that fair? Or should
You own 20 acres? Can we go and visit?
You're
This
welcome.
sounds
No, we're all going to
fantastic.
live in our little hamster cage.
So this brings us
Right.
back to Malthus. We're going to run out of stuff if we don't do this.
Right. Supposedly we will run out of stuff if we don't. And that's
So how
what
do-
the
how
use,
do they
but that's what
get
the useful idiots
enforcement?
believe.
Where does the enforcement mechanism come from?
The
It comes-
EPA.
Right, EPA would be a perfect
Overregulation.
example. Look at what's happening in
USDA.
Idaho. There's a Supreme Court case being argued, or was just argued in front of the Supreme Court, about this couple in Idaho who built on a supposed wetland. Now the EPA issues 3,000 compliance orders a year. 3,000 compliance orders a year with threats of fines or actual fines. And there's no way these people can challenge it in court. They're told you can't challenge it in court, you can't challenge it in court. So that's part of the fight that this Idaho couple has had. It's brought in front of the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has laughed at the EPA and said, you guys are out of control. How can we expect any individual freedoms if you're going to just simply issue these orders and people can't challenge them? And another thing that causes this to be insidious is guess who funds it?
Soros.
Right.
I see.
Millions of dollars given to
We
ICLEI.
could not have a conversation about this without his name coming up. Chris, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining you. And the piece is right here in the Blaze magazine. Everybody get your copy.